Hey guys, it's me, Gavin, and I'm recording this episode of the Backlog Bunker far in advance because there's going to be like 4 weeks where I just can't record new episodes. So I want to just do a bunch of tiny episodes to sate the YouTube algorithm while I'm gone, and hopefully you people too, if anyone even enjoys these. And I was struggling to think of what I would even talk about for these weeks that I'm off, because I wasted all the games that I've already played on those first few episodes that I titled like 0 point whatever, which I'm realizing in retrospect was a bad idea, but you live and you learn, I guess. But I've still played many games over my years, so there are still things I can talk about, and even among things that were in my backlog, there actually are still games I can talk about, because there are games I didn't finish, which I didn't really think about when I was making those first few episodes, but hey, it allows me to talk about things now, so here we go. Death Stranding was a game that was on my backlog, mostly because it is a Hideo Kojima game that was not made by Konami, and if there's anything that I know about Hideo Kojima, is that he's a fucking freak. And so, the Metal Gear Solid games are like the perfect storm, because it is the perfect combination of Kojima being Kojima with being reined in by an actual video game company that knows how to make games fun. And it's not something that we're ever going to get again. If Konami ever makes more Metal Gear, it's never going to be as fun. And if Kojima ever makes more stealth action games, which he is making one for Xbox, it'll never be as fun, because they need the two of them to be combined to make anything that's actually worth anything. And so Death Stranding was always an uphill battle for Hideo Kojima, because it's a game where it's not really a game, it's a walking simulator. And there are parts of it that are a game, but even those parts aren't very fun. But what you will frequently hear from people about Death Stranding is that, on the surface, yeah, it seems like a boring, stupid game. But once you play it, you really get it. And I can understand that for some games. That does happen. That does happen where games from the outside look boring and stupid, but then you actually play them, and they're, like, amazing. That's kind of what Xenoblade was for me, where I saw Chuck Conroy play it, and I was like, oh, that's certainly a game, but never one that I want to play. And then I ended up playing Xenoblade, and I like it a lot. So it is possible for a game to look very uninteresting, but then you get into it, it just clicks. But Death Stranding is not one of those games. Death Stranding is exactly what it says on the tin. It is a walking simulator. And I suspect that the reason people have this perspective of it, where it's like, oh yeah, once you play it, you really get it, is because they connected more with the way the game made them feel than what the game actually is. Which, to be fair, is completely fine. That is how people interact with games, based on how they feel. There are many games that make me feel good that I wouldn't call good games. I think Fantasy Life is one of my favorite games of all time, but it's never a game that I'll ever be able to convince other people to play, because when you actually describe it, it's boring. It's boring, and it's not all that engaging. I could certainly make the argument for Fantasy Life if I really tried, but it would be an uphill battle, to say the least. And so, I don't mind people connecting to Death Stranding because of the way it made them feel, or because it fucking stood in for COVID or whatever, stupid bullshit, right? Because that's just how people are. They're going to connect to things based on how they feel. But the part that irritates me is that when people try to pretend like Death Stranding is more than what it actually is, because like I said, it's not. If you connected with Death Stranding because it is a walking simulator that made you feel at peace, or it's a cozy game, or whatever it is that made you feel the way you felt, then okay, cool, that's perfect. But when people say, hey, Death Stranding is just a walking simulator, you can't call them wrong for that. It is just a walking simulator, but that's what you like about it, isn't it? It is just a walking simulator. You might find umbrage with like the fact that people say it derogatorily, where it's like, oh yeah, it's just a walking simulator. But let's not mince words here. Walking simulators aren't really games, they're walking simulators. Like how Microsoft Flight Simulator isn't really a game, it's a Microsoft Flight Simulator. And for the parts of the game that aren't a walking simulator, don't act like those are anything more than what they actually are either. The BT sections are just walking simulators, but slower. The shooting sections are just walking simulators, but sometimes you press the triggers. At least I think it was the triggers. Is it the triggers if you don't have anything held in your hands? I don't remember. Point is, it has shooting gameplay that I disengaged with after like 5 minutes, because it just was not good enough for it. Now, the story is the only part of Death Stranding that I think is actually worth defending, because there is a story. It's not, like, just a walking simulator. No, there actually is a story to the game. However, calling the story good is where we have problems, because Death Stranding as a story is like if you took that ending cutscene from the Furies fight in Metal Gear Solid 3 and made it an entire game. It's like, oh, what the fuck was that? That was kind of weird, and that's the entire game. Because Death Stranding's story is told in metaphors for, like, the most part, and so a lot of the dialogue is clunky and stupid because it has to represent something else. The characters are clunky and stupid because they have to represent something else. The plot beats are clunky and stupid because they have to represent something else. And a lot of the world building is clunky and stupid because it has to represent something else. And I'll admit that Death Stranding's story is a little bit confusing. And so if someone were to come up to me and be like, hey, what exactly is the problem with Death Stranding's story? I don't know if I would be able to tell them. Because like I said, I dropped the game. That's why I'm talking about it on this little mini episode of Backlog Bunker. I did not complete playing Death Stranding. So, and I watched the cutscenes through a Let's Play. So, if someone were to ask me, hey, what exactly was the problem with Death Stranding's story, I wouldn't be able to tell them. And that's a fair point. You know, I can't slag the game for that. And so, if someone were to ask me what my criticisms of the game were in relation to the story, I wouldn't be able to say anything about that. I think it's stupid, and I will come back to the story at least one day to be able to tell people why it's stupid. But in terms of just the story, I'll admit that I lose that one, right? But I still say Death Stranding is a bad game, because it doesn't matter how good the story of your game is. If the gameplay sucks, then there you go. The gameplay sucks. And it's a video game, so that's pretty important. And I know this is a very hot topic among gamers, and this is probably something I'll actually have as a real topic on the Backlog Bunker, but just to bring it up shortly here, yes, video games do need to be video games, and video games need to be fun. Now, fun does not always mean the same thing for every video game. A horror game is not fun the same way that a visual novel is, and a visual novel is not fun the same way that a shooter is, and a shooter is not fun the same way that an RPG is. But they need to be fun within the confines of their genre, and if the confines of Death Stranding genre is a walking simulator, and it's not a very fun walking simulator, then, well, there you go, it's not a very fun walking simulator. It's not a very fun third-person shooter either, so everything that Death Stranding does gameplay-wise is just not very fun, and that's why I think it's a bad game. It doesn't matter how good the story is if the game parts of the game aren't a game, and so I dropped it.